We're reading today again, still from. Are we all plugged in?
Yeah.
We are. Um, yeah, I didn't think we were. Could he like see that one of our mics wasn't plugged in? So anyway, reading from Letting Go, Dr. David Hawkins. I love this book. It's so it's informative. I mean, not that that. Well, yeah, knowledge is power, you guys. That's the bottom line. And knowledge is freedom. And the I just love this book, and it helps us to. In the beginning, we're dealing with the lower emotions on his scale. It kind of goes from apathy at the very bottom all the way up to enlightenment and passed on conditional love, and so it's an amazing book. It really is. If you really, if you're looking to be happy, joyous, and free this time through on this planet, this is like a text that can help us with all of that. And I'm in chapter 6, and it's a chapter where he talks a lot about fear and how to deal with fear. And we read yesterday about that. It was awesome, and about love and how we can literally love trumps fear. And so now we're on page 96, owning the shadow. And hang into the end. I've got kind of a treat for you. I want to read a little affirmation that I read on a daily basis to you today. And but let's do this. We've got about 10 pages is all. Owning the shadow. And we're going to read up on fear. Owning the shadow. One of the blocks to emotional development is the fear of what lies buried in our unconscious. Really, one of the blocks. So we have actually personally had blocks to emotional development. Imagine. Carl Jung called this area, which we are unwilling to look at and to own, the shadow. He said that the self cannot become healed and whole unless we look at and acknowledge the shadow. This means that buried within us all, in what Jung called the collective unconscious, is everything that we most dislike admitting about ourselves. Okay. The average human, he said, would much rather project his shadow onto the world and condemn it and see it as evil, thinking that his problem is to battle with evil in the world. In actuality, the problem is merely to acknowledge the presence of such thoughts and impulses in ourselves. By acknowledging them, we become quiet. They become quiet, really. Once they are quiet, they are no longer unconsciously run us. In looking at our fears, uh, in looking at our fears of the unknown, which are really fears of what is in the depths of the unconscious, uh, it is useful to have a sense of humor. Once looking at and acknowledged, the shadow no longer has any power. In fact, it is only our fear of these thoughts and impulses that give them any power. Once we become acquainted with our shadow, we no longer have to protect our fears or project our fears upon the world, and they begin to evaporate rapidly. What makes the endless television programs, which are concerned with mayhem and its various forms, so attractive? Because what is being acted out on the screen, where it is safe, are all the forbidden unconscious fantasies in our own psyche. Once we are willing to look at the same movies on the TV screen once we're willing to look at the same movies on the TV screen of our own minds and see whence they really originate, the attraction of these such entertainment disappears. People who have acknowledged the content of their own shadow have no interest in crime, violence, and fearful disasters. One of the blocks to become acquainted with the fears of one's own mind is the fear of the opinions of others. The wanting of their approval goes on inside of our minds in a constant fantasy. We identify with the opinion of others, including authority figures. We identify with the opinions of others, including authority figures, and coalesce these in such a way that we hear it in our own opinion of ourselves. We hear it as our own opinion of ourselves, really. And looking at our fears, then it is well to remember that Carl Jung, saw this reservoir of the forbidden inside the shadow as part of the collective unconscious. The term collective unconscious means that everybody has these thoughts and fantasies. There's nothing unique about any of us when it comes to the way we symbolize our emotions. Everybody secretly harbors the fear that they are dumb, ugly, unlovable, and a failure. Everybody. Wow. Who'd have thought that? The unconscious mind is not polite. It thinks in gross concepts. When it thinks of the phrase murder the bum, when it thinks of the phrase murder the bum, the unconscious literally means that. Look deep within yourself the next time somebody cuts you off in traffic and picture what you would really do to that person if you were strictly honest with yourself. It did not censor the image coming to mind. You'd like to run them off the road, wouldn't you? Pulverize them, push them off the cliff. Isn't that right? That's the way the unconscious thinks. A little dangerous, eh? The reason that a sense of humor is useful is because these images are comical once we look at them. There's nothing awful about it. There's nothing awful about it. It's just the way the unconscious handles images. It doesn't mean that we are a rotten person or that we are potentially a criminal. It just means that we have gotten honest and faced how the human animal mind operates in this dimension. There's no point in getting melodramatic, self-critical, or tragic about it. The unconscious is crude and uncivilized, while our intellect went to prep school. The unconscious remained in the jungle, where it is still swinging in the trees. Looking at the shadow side is not a time to get prissy or squeamish. It's not a time to take it literally either, because the symbols of the unconscious are just that. They are symbols, and they are primitive in nature. If worked with consciously, they can empower us rather than inhibit us. It takes a lot of energy to keep the shadow buried and to suppress our multitude of fears. The result is energy depletion. On the emotional level, it is expressed as the inhibition of the capacity to love, really. Emotional level, it is expressed as the inhibition of the capacity to love. In the world of consciousness, like goes to like, so that fear attracts fear, just as its corollary is true, and love attracts love. The more fear we hold, the more fearful situations we attract to our life. Each fear requires additional energy to create a protective device, until finally all our energy is drained into our extensive defensive measures. The willingness to look at a fear and work with it until we are free of it brings about immediate rewards. Nice. Each of us has